Well, hey everyone, welcome to Binkhorsts and Blockbusters. I'm Kate,
And I'm Garrett.
and today we are reviewing a new to theaters movie, our first fresh, hot off the presses movie since we started the podcast, and it is Oppenheimer.
Yeah, this is a big one. This is the big summer blockbuster. That's not a part of a series product or franchise.
Yeah, and despite appearances, I am not a Barbie girl, so we definitely chose Oppenheimer. I'm more of a worldwide destruction and explosions kind of girl. So we definitely wanted to watch this one first.
Yeah, I was tempted to do the double feature, but at close to $20 for a movie ticket, I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah, there was no part of me that wanted to pay money to see Barbie in theaters. I mean, I know that there are people that are into Barbie, and I'm sure it's a great date movie or like whatever, but it's just not my jam. And there there are some there are things that I look for in a movie to go see in theaters. And to clarify, even though I am a huge movie watcher, huge movie fan, um, I had not been to the movie theater since Star Wars Episode 9 in December of 2019. So this was my first time, and it was good to be back. Um, the theater I went to was very nice, very plush, not very packed. It was good. I enjoyed it. I did not enjoy shilling out so much money, but whatever. We do it for the pod.
Yeah. Um, yeah, wow. The last time you went to the movie theater, I was there, and there was someone
Yeah.
on their phone the entire time. Um, yeah, I had a really good experience. I went and saw this in IMAX, and I think if you have an IMAX theater that you can go to, go get yourself a seat front and center, and prepare to have an almost 4D experience as the sound ripples through you. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, so I definitely, because this is a new movie, we're not going to do any spoilers, but I will say that the sound is the reason why I chose to see this in theaters. It's hard to recreate sound at home. I'm not a, audiophile, and I don't particularly care that my speakers aren't great. I know that other people in my life have complained that my speakers are not great, but whatever, I do not care and I do not notice. But going to see the movie theater, seeing a theater movie in the theaters does give you that experience that you're just not going to get seeing at home. Be immersed, not be distracted. I wasn't going to look at my phone because there's judgment around me. So I think that's an important thing with going to theaters.
Yeah, I looked at my phone only once at the very end because I wanted to know if it was going to end soon because I really had to go. It's
That
a
is the problem with a 3 hour movie in the theaters.
Yes. I mean, like movies used to have intermissions, and I'd be happy if we brought that back.
Yeah, I think that is a good thing that I do miss with, some of our favorites like Lawrence of Arabia, and a personal favorite of mine, Gone with the Wind, has a great intermission point. But they also have a good point to have an intermission. And I think like the movie that we reviewed last week, Jaws, it had a very solid, you know, part one and part two. So there is a good place for that intermission. In this movie, I'm not sure where that would have been, and we can
No.
speculate later on.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing that I wanted to point out was so you saw this in IMAX. I saw it on film in 35 millimeter.
Oh wow.
So that was cool. Thanks, Philadelphia Film Society, for making that a possibility. I will say that while I really enjoy film so if we get in the very technical world of pixels, um, film has no pixels. It's an infinite number of pixels are on a film. Now, that's one of the reasons why I like it. That's why I like photography over digital photography, like film photography over digital photography, for that reason. However, film in the theaters comes with defects, and so there were blotches and there were, lines, like very minimal. It wasn't distracting at all, but it did have that kind of old effect that I thought gave this movie, because this movie is set in the 40s, 30s, 40s, 50s. It was a good effect on this movie. If this was happening during another movie, I don't think I would have enjoyed that. Then again, you aren't having most films be shown on film in theaters these days.
Yeah, there was because I wanted to see it on film, but there's nowhere in the state of Washington that it's on film.
Well, you should move to the East Coast.
Uh, Pass. We're gonna get along with the segments on our podcast.
Yeah, so what's on TV this week, Garrett?
So I've been watching some TV, and good news, everyone. Futurama has returned, and it's all right. Um,
Cool.
if you have Hulu in the USA, you can watch it the same day it comes out, and Disney Plus everywhere else. The first episode came out, and I watched it. I was entertained, uh, but I feel like it's lost a little bit of its charm. Maybe it just needs to get its footing. But what's more likely is I think the Futurama that I remember watching is a lot of those like really strong episodes. Like I went through and looked at how many episodes of Futurama there'd been and how many seasons and the 3 or 4 reboots we're on now. And I don't think I recognized like half the episodes there. So perhaps we just haven't got those iconic episodes yet in this season since we only have one, but I'm sure they'll come. Uh,
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point because I mean, like South Park, Futurama, most of Futurama I watched pre-streaming, and it was in syndication
mhm.
on Comedy Central, I think.
Yeah.
Futurama was on Comedy Central, right?
Yeah, for a long time it was on Comedy
Yeah.
Central.
So like they were showing the episodes that I watched the most often were some of the best episodes. And it wasn't in this streaming era of like with Archer, I've seen every episode from every season in order many times. I can tell you, which episode comes before which episode. But with these shows that were in syndication, it's totally different. And I think that's an interesting change for television that has happened in the last 15 years that I don't think we're ever going to get back to that where the best episodes are on all the time, especially in a show like this where there might be an arc, there might be a couple
Right.
episode arc, but in general you get back to stasis at the end of the episode like The Simpsons.
Yeah, which has
And
been going for 30 years or
yeah,
more than that.
yeah, it
It's
is
been
older
going a
than
long
I am.
time.
So, yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I'm glad that it is good. I'll check it out. I haven't had time to watch it yet, but I'm sure I will.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, it's something new but familiar, which is always, it has a place. Sometimes you're feeling it.
Hmm.
Uh,
Well, there's a
so,
nostalgic importance to these cartoons in our lives.
oh,
As
absolutely.
a, I'm a middling millennial, you're a Zoomer. We grew up with a lot of cartoons that are that teach a lot of lessons and are funny and irreverent and different and unique. Futurama, South Park, Venture Brothers, Archer, The Simpsons, and I mean there's Family Guy too, but I was never into that. But these cartoons that we grew up with, and Aqua Teen Hunger Force.
Of course.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Meatwad, come on. Um, yeah, they have shaped our generation in ways that other forms of television have not, and I think that's interesting. It's something fun to think about, and I hope as we keep getting older that they will keep bringing back some of the things that we love and introducing even better cartoons that we can watch. Like BoJack Horseman in the
Oh,
last 10
amazing.
years. I mean, these are cartoons made for us, made for the particular doomscape that we live in, and we want more.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, Bad news, everyone. So I finished watching The Circle, and it's not great, but it's not terrible. Um, there's some really solid performances amongst a lot of the cast here. But in the last couple episodes, I feel like there are just a couple too many like leaps in the story that keeps it going that I feel like weren't necessarily earned. Um, and it kind of gets a bit sloppy, and the resolution isn't as triumphant as a story that starts out so like mysterious and intricate. I feel should be. I still enjoyed watching it. I think it's worth a watch if the premise itself interests you. If you're into these sort of like crime shows, I was completely off base when I said there was, something like truly mystical afoot, but it was interesting. I'll give it that. I was
Okay.
entertained for
So
the
so if
show.
I'm browsing HBO and I'm trying to figure out what to watch, I should just watch Deadwood again and not this.
Uh, um, sure. Uh, apparently, this is hard to find on HBO. We told our parental units, or at least I did, to check this one out, and they haven't been able to find it on there. So it's completely possible this show is only for me, and I'm the only one that's ever seen it, and that ever will see it.
Well,
I don't know.
I definitely saw the trailer. I watched the trailer on HBO, and it has been showing up in the first like few screens of my HBO when I turn it on. So I think that this might be a failing of our parents and
Okay.
uh, not the HBO app. Though the HBO app has its issues, I will
Yes.
admit,
Yes.
strong issues.
So
But they could have just searched for it in the search bar,
well,
but they probably would have said the wrong name.
they did. They searched for Circle, which is a film starring Tom Hanks and Emma Watson right after Harry Potter, and
Ooh,
isn't about anything even close to this at all.
no.
Uh,
No, that sounds terrible actually. Well, and then there's also the reality TV show The Circle on Netflix, which would have been hilarious for them to watch instead. Yep. Well, I'm sorry it didn't pan out for you. I know that having a show that doesn't hit all the buttons can be very disappointing in the end, but
it hit a lot of them, and it hit enough of them that made me want to keep coming back to it and to like want to
okay.
see the conclusion. But I don't know. It's one thing about a lot of mysteries in television, and there's you could look at something like The Sopranos or Lost to feel like that sense of like the ending was it just kind of stopped, or like it wasn't building to something like you have those sorts of things. This isn't one of those that's like a disappointment. It's just like, oh, okay, we're this is over now.
Gotcha.
um
Maybe it's simpler than initially proposed.
yes.
No, it's no True Detective season one.
No, I hesitate to say anything to True Detective season one, but
Yeah,
you
well,
know,
that's true.
we did compare it to that, and I don't think that comparison is as earned. But if this was a True Detective season, I feel like it would have fit in with like the second and third season, which are
Okay.
still mysteries and still
hmm
character driven and motivated plots.
Yeah, so the other thing that when I was watching the trailer and I'm looking at the movie poster or the show poster, the actors look significantly like other actors, but just slightly different, and they are not those actors, and it is very confusing to me. Like I could have sworn the blonde lady was from Better Call Saul, but it is not her. And this just bothers me that they chose actors who look slightly like other people, but they just are not.
Well, Timothy Oliphant's in it, and he's in stuff, but yeah, the rest I didn't know from things. But looking at the photo we have on screen of the promotional image, I absolutely understand what you mean. Um, it's kind of unnerving now that you bring that up.
Yeah, it's bothered me the whole time, actually. That's why I haven't watched it. It's like an invasion of the body snatchers happening, and I can't deal with it.
Okay. uh,
Okay.
so
So,
I understand you've been watching something on TV.
yes, I've been you recommended The Bear, some friends recommended The Bear. One of my friends actually likened it to The Wire, as that it was as high of level television as The Wire, which for me is like that's a pinnacle that is very difficult to reach. I mean, The Wire and Deadwood are the best, in my opinion, HBO shows there ever were, and it's hard to get up there. But I watched the first episode and I almost had a stroke. It was so stressful. I like family dynamics, running a restaurant, cooking, the racism elements, all of it. Like money. Oh my God. Stressed me the fuck out. Being in Chicago, I don't even know. It was just a lot. It was a lot. I'm gonna keep going, but I'm gonna be talking about this show for the next 3 months because it's gonna take me that long to watch it because I don't want to have a stroke while I'm watching it. And then your warning to me about a holiday episode is just I
Yeah,
don't know if I'm gonna be able to take it.
it it is a lot. It's been a while since I saw that first season, but yeah, it's just as stressful as the second one.
Great.
I mean, it's very different. I always look to movies and television as a way to allow yourself to exist in different spaces than you normally would, and feel different things than what you can normally feel. And in movies and television, when you react to it the way you're feeling, it's always safe. So being able to feel like stressed out and anxious over the scenes or worry over the characters, it's safe, but it is a way to properly feel those things. And then something
Yeah.
I really appreciate about this show is, from the first episode, you're feeling with these characters, and you're
Yeah.
experiencing the world through them, which is difficult to do for a lot of shows in the first season, let alone the first couple episodes.
Absolutely, and especially with the short episodes. I mean, and that's the same reason why, we watched the Japanese nuclear power plant explosion show.
The
And it's
days.
why I watch, Chernobyl over and over again. And it is that, wanting to feel something, to feel that anxiety, to feel in the moment and touch the sublime of human existence. So, which is very on brand for today's movie review.
Yeah. So do you want to get into it, or do you have more to say on the bear?
I will report back after I finish this first season.
Okay, that seems good. Uh, okay. So it's now time for our main event. Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer, starring Cillian Murphy.
Yeah, so we wanted to, because this movie is new, the odds that you have seen it, our viewers, are, not as high as it could be. So we're going to break this down into some soft spoilers so I have friends who would like to know nothing about a movie, don't even like to watch trailers. I have a lot of friends that are like into knowing a little bit about the movie, and that's what our soft spoilers are going to be about. And then we'll mark a timestamp where we start talking, and we'll try and delineate, shout at you that we're going to start talking about real spoilers as we get there, because there's so much in this movie that we want to talk about, and we want to talk about it as a serious critical review. And if you don't want to be spoiled for it, then stop listening, and then we'll try and bring it back at the end when we talk about what we've learned in a way that's less spoilery by then. So
Yeah,
that's your
absolutely.
warnings.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
no
as
complaining.
and as for this podcast and the rest of them, if you go into the description, you can click on the time codes that'll jump you to all of the sections of our podcast. Um,
Yeah. So one of the things that we've already kind of talked about, like, and I don't know if you had a plan, Garrett. You're the one that comes up with the plans, but I'm gonna go for it here, is sound. And the sound in this movie, the visuals, the immersive experience that this movie gives you is phenomenal. I really enjoyed the mood that the sound does, and in like many Christopher Nolan movies, they mix music in a way that is not hokey, and it works with the sound team in a way that it doesn't feel like um, musical or like goofy romance music can even I'm even thinking about like Pride and Prejudice, like some of the music in there you're just like, oh, okay.
The
Or like
dance montage of Spider-Man 3.
I have do not know what you're talking about, and I do
Okay.
not want to know. What did Mallory Archer say? I don't understand what you're talking about, and I refuse to acknowledge it. Or no, that wasn't even Mallory. That was Lucille from Arrested Development. I
That's
refuse, Garrett.
same actress, so it all works. It all works.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I could feel the sound almost as soon as it began. I came in a little bit late to the theater showing and saw a trailer for something coming from hell, some possessed ghost story, and could feel the sound as I was walking to my seat. And that's so nice. I love that about movies. But this whole time, and it keeps you just as immersed as the visuals, which is very unique. Um, and comparing this to like Christopher Nolan's other movies, like our mother constantly refers to Inception as the one with the noise, and I feel like that is an accurate description of Inception. But last year or the year before, when we tried to watch Tenet, we all had a bad time because we couldn't understand what anybody was saying, and then have the action scenes not blow our eardrums out. So it was so nice to have this one really focused and tuned in.
Yeah, and that is such an important thing. The balancing of the sound is great in the theater. At home, it can just be shit. So another reason why to see something in the theaters, especially like this, where sound is so important.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it was very similar to the sound, the way it was very similar to Inception, to Christopher Nolan's Batman's, where you have music, but you don't notice that it's music, and you have sounds and tension, and then the absence of sound. He uses the absence of sound in this movie just perfectly, and I really, really enjoyed that. Like that
Mhm.
was the reason why I wanted to see it in the theaters, and it was the reason why I was happy I paid $15 plus $9 for popcorn.
Jesus Christ.
Well, and
Um,
Sour Patch Kids, but
okay. Okay. Um, yeah, on
it was
top
good
of
popcorn.
I worked in a movie theater for a short time. There's no such thing as good movie theater popcorn. But moving on, the movie is not only, amazing to listen to, but it looks incredible. There's so many just like vibrant scenes and set pieces and beautiful landscapes out there in the desert. Um, a lot of really well set up shots and rooms that keep you like knowing exactly where everyone is.
Yeah,
Just fantastic visuals that we keep coming back to that like give a sense of like scale and like a time scale and like how far we've gone in our adventure following the story of Oppenheimer.
yeah, and like some other movies where I have harped on this many times. These are like themes Caitlin enjoys movies with limited sets. So in this
Yes.
movie, I'm not going to identify the sets in the soft spoiler system, but there were very few rooms where lots of stuff happened in. And for this, the plot, that makes sense. But they also keep returning to it, like the flashbacks and stuff. They all return to these very limited sets where they're very specific. There's very like I'm sure that you can think right now if we, had a competition, we could draw the shape of the room, of like three different rooms in this movie, and some significant things in it,
Yeah,
including like where some people sat around.
yeah.
Like
It
it's that specific.
so remember in our Reservoir Dogs review where I brought up the mammoth tusks that were behind the guy in his office. If you go to all these different places and you have a film that takes place in so many different like locations and set pieces and is full of different like, you know, plants and shiny objects and trophies and like whatever, that's going to distract you a lot from what's going on. So when we keep coming back to these rooms, we've set up, what's in here, what are they interacting with, how are they interacting with it, and you can really focus on every moment of the performances that they have together.
Yeah, and I think that they also use the austerity of the war years as a, way to create simplicity and to not have a bunch of tchotchkes and, weird crap around. I mean, the other thing that this movie is very much it is a man's world. So there's not a lot of frilly things, and the sets are very simple. But I think that that adds, so completely to the movie. And when we think of atomic things, we think of very clean, we think of white coats, we think of hats, that's the world that we're envisioning. And I think that's also a lot of what we think of the 40s and the war years is these clean, simple lines, not a lot of crap. There wasn't a lot of, superfluous anything going on. And I think that they capture that so well.
Yeah.
The other thing do you have anything to add there?
No.
The other thing that I wanted to point out in the kind of like softball spoilers that we're doing here is the costume design in this
Oh,
film is phenomenal. And I think that so on the Titanic, I know I mentioned this, that, at some point, all the officers just look the same because they're wearing the same thing. And they do an excellent job of casting the different characters who look unique. They all have, unique hair, or they wear, their clothes in a certain way, their posture. I'm not sure if they added, like shoulder padding or things like that to make these characters all look different. And then a lot of them are academics, scientists, so they do have, some little like unique things about themselves, so it makes it easier to tell them apart in a war movie where in a lot of war movies, I mean, I watched Band of Brothers like 7 times, and I could not tell you the difference between several of the characters from episode to
right,
episode because they're
right.
wearing the same clothes, they're smoking the same cigarettes, they have the same color hair. Like, I just it's difficult for me to, I don't know if it's a face blindness thing or whatever, but I like it when, especially in period pieces, they make an effort to differentiate the characters.
Yeah, absolutely. There were so many characters that even in their, like the objects they had or the way they were dressed that communicated so much about their personality and what they were doing, and reminded you who they were as this movie spans a long period of time and has so many characters in it. It was easy to be like, oh, okay, that's this guy. He hasn't changed much. Um, whereas you very easily could have had these people reappearing all the time very differently to follow some trends or fashion or style, and that kind of would have broken it in
Yeah.
how it's portrayed here.
Yeah, and the other thing is there is some time jumps in this movie, and they do an excellent job with Cillian Murphy and styling him to change with those times. But they really only do that for him. So the other characters, they have a little bit of fashion change, but they do keep their style. But for him, he changes his hair significantly. He's also a very unique looking person, so you're never confused as to which character he is. He is the main character. So he is the main character energy. But they do an excellent job of giving you those little, semiotic notices that we're dealing with different time periods in this, portion in this scene.
Yeah. Um, I really think this movie's going to win a shitload of awards. Um, I talked to you about this before we started, but I thought this movie was edited fantastically. There's not a moment of downtime. There's not, a single scene or anything like that that could be trimmed or cut to make it faster or less, impactful. Um,
Yeah. Well,
it's beautifully shot. It sounds great. It'll probably get a Best Picture nomination. It probably will win it unless something else comes out. But as far as I'm
well,
concerned, this is,
Dune.
well, we'd all like to see that.
Yeah.
But I think this has a lot more like mainstream and Academy appeal, which is really
Yes.
what those
Well,
awards
and
matter
also
to.
it does have a scene where something is being filmed on film, and
Ah,
that movies with
yes.
filming in them tend to win the Oscar. So
Yes, that is where they're at.
yeah. So the other thing I was gonna say, and like the pacing of this movie is fantastic. It is really well paced movie. The inertia of it is great. There was never a time when I wanted to look at my phone to wonder what time it was because I was perpetually being moved forward, by the pace of the movie and by the plot and what was going on. I do think that 3 hours is a very long movie, and in that very like, a Titanic producer executive, way. I was like, well, I wonder, if we could cut an hour out of this movie, I think it would have more appeal. And I do think that it would have more appeal if it was an hour shorter. But where on earth that would have been cut from, I mean, it's the same question. And as I was walking home from the theater, that's what I was thinking about is like, could you cut a single scene from this movie? And I don't think you can.
I don't really think so. And
Even the scenes that I don't like that we'll talk about in the spoiler section, I don't think you could cut that time of that scene. I would just have wanted it filmed differently.
right. Um, and you might be hearing this and you might be scared going in that you don't have the prerequisite knowledge or enough understanding of the topic at hand, and you feel like you might be left behind because we've explained this is a fast moving movie. No. You'll get to there are so many scenes with all of these characters, you'll get to know them, and if you don't identify or remember them by name at the start, by the end, you're going to be at least recognizing the faces and knowing exactly who they are and what they're doing and why it's important.
Yeah, and it definitely was not overly sciency. There was no point where I was like, looking up at the ceiling, wondering, what on earth they're talking about.
Yeah.
Like, is calculus life? I don't know. There was
This
never that kind
is
of moment.
Yeah, there is no scientist man that comes in and explains everything to us.
Yeah.
Really, like, which is weird for a movie that's based on like a huge portion of our scientific understanding of everything. But you never have that one scene where it's just somebody spouting exposition to you.
Yeah. Yeah, which I mean, on the other hand, one of the themes of the movie is secrecy and keeping this all, tight-lipped, and I think that, that is significant and that they don't want us to know how the bomb is made.
Yeah, they don't want the tens of thousands of moviegoers to understand how to build that.
Yeah. I mean, we're all commies anyway, so. So I think do you have any other non-spoilery things you wanted to discuss?
Um, if you want to go see it, now's the time. It's probably only going to be in theaters for a couple more weeks as of the release of this episode. If you've missed your opportunity to see it in IMAX or on film, I'm sorry. Hopefully and possibly it'll come back again. I know they've done re-releases of a couple of his movies before, and if it's up for a bunch of awards, it's entirely possible.
Yeah, I think they said it would be a 6-week runtime, so mid-July to the end of August, probably,
Okay.
2023.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this in the future, that's the range, and then I'm sure it'll be streaming somewhere relatively quickly after that, because
Yeah.
I think that this is a movie that people are going to want to see at home. I
Oh
think that
yeah.
the Irishman phenomenon of not wanting to see a 4-hour movie outside your home is real. And I think that this movie is one that, while the sound is great, and like, I, being the kind of person that I am and the things that I am interested in, found this to be utterly fascinating movie and gripping, and like, I really enjoyed it. I certainly imagine that there are a lot of people that would be more interested in seeing it at home while streaming, in the future, where you can, maybe not spend $24, but
Yeah. Streaming does have its cost, though.
it does. But I don't see them when I get a receipt, handed to me after,
Yeah.
with a small bag of popcorn.
Yeah.
So,
Or
and
manually selecting your third row seat.
popcorn at home, much cheaper.
Yes, and it'll smell up your whole apartment or home
Mm.
and give you a real authentic movie theater vibe.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I have to say, I was very happy at the movie theater that there was no terrible people anywhere near me. So,
So that's the thing I found with these sort of like bigger movies, and especially going to the movies now after the pandemic and going and seeing things that like I know a lot of people want to see. I've run into far fewer people who are just like on their phones or making noise or fiddling with all of the packets of snacks at the theater now because it's seen more as we're going to the movie theater, where we're going and doing an event, which a lot of people have made with the Barbie Oppenheimer phenomena. It has brought people to like want to do the double feature and to like really make a time out of going to the movies, which is still, in my mind, something very special. I don't
yeah.
think movie theaters are going anywhere. I hope they don't because I like going and seeing something this big and epic.
Well, and for me, like, this, I mean, this is 4 years since I had seen a movie in theaters, and there are a lot of things that I don't like about theaters, and I don't like, dumb people, distracting me. I'm easily distracted in the movie theater. I don't like movies that take so long that I have to go to the bathroom, twice during the thing, and I can't pause it. But at the same time, yeah, I do think it's an experience. And it's also like, both of us went and saw this by ourselves, which was great. I really enjoyed just doing something by myself for fun. I mean, for the podcast too, but like, yeah, it had, and I mean, in a movie theater, there's no judgment there. No one fucking cares what the other people are doing there.
Well, nobody can
Like,
see you.
yeah, yeah, it doesn't matter.
But
So,
a bit more than that, if you're ever apprehensive about going to the movie theater, just try to schedule a time to go see a movie with 3 or 4 of your friends and go through the hell that is finding seats that fit for all of you, a time that fits for all of you, and a movie that fits for all of you, and you will understand that going to the movies by yourself is a much better experience.
Garrett, that is 100% the reason why I went by myself. I didn't even bother. I was going to, like, I thought about it. I was like, oh, I'm sure I have friends that would want to go see this with me. And then I was like, I can't deal with scheduling another thing in my life.
Yeah, I was like, I'm going to a matinee. Everybody should be at work. Nobody was. They were all off seeing Oppenheimer. I thought I was being cheeky, but I got played. Um,
Anyway, so let's dig into the real spoilers of this movie. Like, we're gonna really get into this. So if you don't want to have this movie spoiled, then please turn off now. If you don't care about spoilers, enjoy hearing us talk. And if you've seen the movie, then I hope that you find something interesting in what we're saying. I do think we have a lot of great thoughts about this movie, and I'm excited to really dig in.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. So there's this thing called the atomic bomb, and that goes off. Um, it was bad for a lot of people.
Yes, that is a thing that happens in this film.
Well, we got the big spoiler out of the way. So what else happens?
Okay, so there's two major themes in this movie. I think there is the race and the inertia of building the bomb, and they have to do it quickly because they need to do it before the Nazis. This is all started when news breaks that the Nazis have split the atom. I think, right?
So it wasn't the Nazis had split the atom. It was, I think, the Germans had figured out a way to do it, and then the Nazis came into power, and they knew once they had figured out how to split the atom, it was just a race to figure out who could build the bomb.
Yeah, that's basically what I said. But anyway, so that's the one theme, the race to build the bomb and everything that goes into that. And Oppenheimer is the one of the head scientists on this, endeavor.
Yeah, him and
But he
Matt
wasn't,
Damon.
yeah, because of Matt Damon,
Yeah.
who's a soldier, and he has a little, we won't call it a Hitler mustache, we will call it a Charlie Chaplin mustache.
No, he has a
Um,
normal mustache.
no, it's kind of weird looking.
Okay. Look, there are a lot of mustaches in this film. We can't get hung up on every one of them. Uh,
Yeah. Well, I'm just glad that Cillian Murphy didn't have a mustache, so we'll get into that later. Anyway, the other theme that's going on in this movie is this political the politics of the times, but also surrounding um, Oppenheimer's politics both before he joins the program, the project, and afterward. And um, that's a huge theme, and it is a rough theme, and one that I found to be particularly, you know, uh, I don't know. It's a theme and it sucks. That's what it is. It sucks.
well,
Not
go
not that the movie doesn't make it suck. It
right,
just sucks that this happened.
right.
Like, fuck capitalism. Ah.
Yeah,
Anyway.
so much of like our perception of this point in history, because we weren't alive through it, has definitely come from the American propaganda we were fed through our public schooling system, and then everything else
Well,
that
and
we've
also
learned
media
since then.
and
Yeah,
movies and yeah.
and framing the movie as a fight between different uh, political ideologies of communism, fascism, the Nazis, having the American patriotism, which is its own insane force, is a balancing act that it does pretty well.
Yeah.
um
Oh yeah. I thought that the discussions about politics and the balances of power and the idea that the American government might not have always done the right thing. I think that comes out in this movie in very positive ways.
yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. Do we want to just get right into communist stuff?
Yeah, we can talk about
Okay.
communism.
So, early on in his career, Oppenheimer was a supporter of the communist movement, of unions, of fair labor and things like that. That many academics were, and liberal people were at the time.
Yeah,
And he ends up going to some of these parties. And the interesting thing in this is that while we have an understanding of like unions are good, it doesn't really go much deeper than that into what communism means to these people.
Yeah, really, when we see the communist gathering, it's just a lot of people standing around with cocktails, which makes communism seem pretty awesome. But they, like you said, they're just academics. They're just philosophers. They're not, you know, really fighting for anything necessarily. And this comes to the detriment of one of our main characters who we follow, who is a love interest to Oppenheimer, um, who is a communist and does have party ties, but they're not really developed outside of that is their personality. They have that connection. And his ties to these communists is what leads to a downfall later on in his career.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that if there is one failing of this movie, it fails to identify, any themes or, goals of those people and of their interests, of even Oppenheimer's interest in the socialist movements, which, we talk about capitalism and communism and socialism and anarchy on the podcast enough that I think that, anybody listening would be like they could identify, even between the two of us, like our core beliefs as they relate to those issues. And, it just was very surface level. On the other hand, this is a great tool, or it works in the way that later on, when Oppenheimer is denying that he has connections to communists, he doesn't have connections to communists because they had cocktails together. They, talked about, some niche philosophers or other academic papers or
Mm-hmm.
Carl Jung or whatever, rather than anything substantive. They were trying to unionize the radiology lab, like, oh, like, but that's not farm laborers. It's not, a train workers.
Yeah, it's not what we associate those things with today, I guess. Um, and it's certainly the view of communism in the McCarthy era was much different than the view of communism pre-World War II, and then is certainly a lot different than the idea of communism we have now.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that, in the I think they bring up a few times of, well, aren't the Soviets our allies? Shouldn't we talk to them about what we're doing? That like that question is posed, but it's determined that it's a national security issue to, because these allies are not really our allies. They're only minimal allies, and you very much get that impression.
Yeah, yeah, that sort of part of this story is communicated rather well. And again, I think this is one of the things where if we looked at an alternative history and seen these two powers communicated on this, that could have changed what we look at as the Cold War. Would there have been that entirely? It does a good job posing those sort of like questions to you, the viewer, and then for you to draw your own conclusion on it. There's not necessarily a communism good, communism bad kind of mentality in the film. Merely, this is how it affected people at the time.
Right. Yeah, because communism, what even is communism is never really defined.
Yeah, even
Um,
even to these people, nobody ever like speaks about it really.
mhm.
Like in terms of like how they believe. I think one
Yeah,
person has a throwaway line that is just from Capital about, property being theft. And it's like, well, even that was mistranslated by somebody.
yeah,
It's it's
possession
weird that
or
yeah, it's weird that these people don't have like a firm conversation about their beliefs. But
yeah,
it goes to show and to add on to Oppenheimer's opinion that he was never a communist, that he just had associations with people who talked about stuff, which is pretty tenuous at best if you're going after anybody. I've talked about a lot of things.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, and then the greater, so we have this issue, we have the specter of communism that it stops him from having, getting his initial security clearance, and it stops a lot of people from initially trusting him. But later on, you have the great politics of, being a, you know, supremely intelligent theorist. And that comes with its drawbacks. And I think that this movie does a great job of showing how our government, our academic system, and various other apparatuses do their darndest to make sure that the brightest minds of our country don't do the most that they could do.
Absolutely. They're
And I think that's a huge theme of this movie.
yeah, they're only useful until they aren't anymore.
Hmm.
Um, and we definitely see that with Oppenheimer. As soon as the United States government really has the bomb, he's kind of sidelined. Um, he comes back a little bit here and there, but then people conspire against him to get him out of his position, to just not have him be a problem anymore that they think he could be. Um,
Yeah. And, they see him as a threat, as a charismatic person, as a genius, as a, just a brilliant academic. And rather than nurturing those brilliant, thoughts and encouraging him to explore his interests, they do everything that they can to try and stamp him down because they don't want him to encroach on their own power. And I don't think that was ever something that, at least in the movie version, I don't think that he was ever power hungry. And I think that this is an interesting dynamic that a lot of academics have, is that they aren't power hungry. They are thirsty for knowledge, and those things can be conflated.
yeah, I would definitely agree. He never seemed power hungry. Um, I think there are a few scenes that lead me to believe he liked the attention, but I feel like that's a whole different story. That's much more different than being power hungry.
Oh, the attention, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
and
he had a platform to talk to people about his ideas. People took him more seriously. Towards the beginning, when he meets with Matt Damon says, along the lines of, "You're a character, you're a personality, somebody who's a bit difficult to work with. That's why we haven't approached you before." And afterwards, he's has a lot more praise. So I think that gives him a lot more confidence to, interact with more and the greater scientific community.
yeah, I think that, once he has the respect that he thinks he deserves, he is then able to um, do even more. And I think that the other thing is that, he very much understood that he could not do it himself, that he needed these teams, he needed these different parts in order to build the bomb as
He
a
tried
whole.
really hard to do it himself, though.
Yeah.
But it's another one of those things that if he didn't do it, we would have a similar movie about somebody else.
Maybe or maybe not. Maybe we never would have made the bomb.
Yeah, that's something to think about. Um, because we know later on he had some resistance to the development of the hydrogen bomb, which would have been the next big one. And people started listening to him and taking his side a bit more on the ethics of the bombs and things like that. So we know, he starts to cut through to people.
Yeah, and the balance between the ethics, and because he has to use economic arguments, and he has to say that, oh, well, if you start working on the hydrogen bomb, that means that you'll stop working on this bomb. He has to make these kinds of more capitalist arguments in
Because
the
you can't appeal to emotion with the
yeah,
military. They
he
don't care.
can't, yeah, they do not care. They just want bigger and better and more. And this is, the birth of the American military industrial complex, where we need the next big thing. We need another thing. We need it bigger. The size bombs that we dropped, the hydrogen bombs, I mean, it's crazy. Have you ever watched there's a map where it'll like ding every time a nuclear bomb goes off over the course of the last 100 years?
Yeah, yeah, I think I've seen that.
I mean, it's
Um,
just incredible. Like, we think of Trinity and then we think of Hiroshima, and then, like, we know that there's bomb testing, but you cannot appreciate how many nuclear bomb tests we did. It's just Americans,
oh yeah,
let
let
alone the
alone,
French, the English, the Russian, the North Korean, the Chinese. I mean, I think India even tested some.
yeah,
Like, the amount of nuclear bombs that have exploded on our planet is incredible. And I don't think that Oppenheimer could have anticipated that, and
right,
the arms race that followed. And I
yeah,
think that that is very much something that as you're watching the movie, you understand that he is concerned about, that he sees the future in a very, I'm making a Dune reference, in a very, like, you're seeing the terrible futures stretching before you and trying to do anything to make a difference.
right. Yeah,
It
and
all
if
comes back to Dune.
it all comes back to Dune. And if you want to have fun playing around and maybe understanding a bit more of the devastation that these bombs can cause, there is a website that you can go to, and it has like a open maps, and then you can place down the various different nuclear devices we've launched, anything from the big boy to the Tsar's bomb. That was the biggest thing we've ever detonated, and put that over the cities you live in and see how bad and how much radiation and how much of an effect it would have. It's truly horrifying.
Yeah, and it is horrifying, and it's horrifying to think about all the places that we have bombed and the long-term consequences of those. But it's also interesting to think about, and we'll talk about this more later. The fact that we haven't destroyed the world,
Yeah,
and I personally don't think we're very close, but we will discuss that more
right,
near the
right.
end. So the big political, discussion in this is really about Strauss versus Oppenheimer. And this movie takes you on a journey of
Yes,
Strauss discussing Oppenheimer, of talking about his life, of Oppenheimer being deposed by a prosecutor for a jury to be able to determine, not a jury, a three-person panel to determine if he can have a
tribunal.
security clearance. Yeah.
Yeah,
And this is very masterfully done in a almost Ocean's 11 heisty kind of way, where it's revealed, the bits and pieces are revealed, and the gears turn toward a resolution that is coming, and then it is eventually turned on its head, and I
right.
really enjoyed that.
Yeah. So I hadn't known about like the that Strauss would be the big conflict in the film. So like when you're watching it, if you don't know that that's the main conflict, you think, oh well, once they build the Trinity, they do the Trinity test, that's the climax. But no, the climax is long after that when we're bouncing around between Strauss and the Senate committee and the room where Oppenheimer's being interrogated in. It's uh, it's quite the powerful set of scenes, and yeah, I understand what you mean with like all of that coming together and really building. It really starts to crescendo there.
Hmm. Yeah, and it very much parallels the crescendo toward the atomic bomb going off, and the pace of the movie, where you can tell they're getting close. and then when they start scheduling it, because everybody wants the war to end,
Yes.
and the bomb is close enough that it's going to make a difference. And I mean, it's worth noting, historically, we were doing all kinds of shit to try and figure out how to make this war end, not the world, just the war.
Yeah, yeah, the war end. Yeah.
And all thinking about like all the different apparatuses that were in motion and hurtling toward a you know a conclusion, and this being just one of them that they were trying to synchronize and doing the test. But the first test, like that, like the tension that there are scenes where you see them building the bomb. I guess they're building the bomb with
Yeah.
these blocks that slowly go in like puzzle pieces over 20 minutes of scenes. Like you see very short snippets of them just putting in another puzzle piece to show you that they're getting closer and closer.
Yeah. And that is another one of those scenes that we are repeatedly drawn back to so we can, see the progress they're making, and the glass vessels that are start filling up with the marbles of the to
Yeah,
represent how much plutonium and uranium we've refined for these bombs. Once they get full, it's time.
yeah. And that was such a great visual effect to keep us in time and to keep us, engaged in that. Like this is what we're building toward. This is how close we are.
Yeah.
And as you get closer and closer, the tension just rises and rises.
Yeah.
And it really is um a
And
great crescendo.
as the movie goes on and we see the jars being filled, we see they getting filled more and more, which
Hmm.
focuses on a part that the movie doesn't touch on as much about most of the money that was spent on the Manhattan Project, the 2 billion something that was spent. Most of it went to the factories that were being built and the mining operations to refine this material, and just to feed that machine
Yeah.
um, of nuclear Armageddon.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too that they put so much resources into something that they really didn't know would work. And wow, you have a bunch of scientists, standing around nodding like, yeah, this will work. We can do this. This is a bomb.
I mean, the
Um,
as we'll see in the Cold War, the United States government puts tons of money towards things that they don't know that work or that will work, and they don't work. Um, so,
that's true.
I don't
Yeah,
think
this
they
is
have a
just the
problem with
beginning.
that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Tune,
yeah,
tune in
you're
for the
right.
Men Who Stare at Goats episode.
Oh gosh. Oh wow, yeah. I need to rewatch that one. Um, MK Ultra. Anyway, um, yeah, yeah. Like it's the machine that they built, and too, like the other thing about Oppenheimer is that he was in charge at um
Los
in New
Alamos.
Mexico in Los
Yeah.
Alamos, and they show him wielding his charisma, and they show him not being the kooky scientist, but being somebody who can adequately communicate with the kooky scientists and get them all to work toward the goal in a efficient manner, which
Hmm.
is impressive. Like if you
Yes.
spend any time with academics, it's chaos. They don't want to work on the same things. And there's even that tension with the hydrogen bomb physicist who wants to further research that, and he's like, I'm not working on this anymore. I want to work on the hydrogen bomb instead. And Oppenheimer says, okay, we can do that. You can work on that. We'll meet once a week for an hour, and you can stay, and we want you to stay and to think about this in case this other shit doesn't work, you know. And so he's able to manipulate these people, manipulates negative word for what he
Right.
was doing.
Entice, persuade.
Entice, persuade, encourage these scientists to work in a fashion that is um, efficient toward the goal.
Yes. So there's a scene I'd like to talk about.
Okay.
So shortly after the Trinity test and the first bombings on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, uh, we get this scene where Killian's giving a speech like, "Hey, we did it. I'm proud of everybody here. We dropped the bomb. We ended the war. If only we got to use it on the Nazis." And it was a really great scene because as we go through it, it has an incredible sound energy and incredible visual stimuli. He almost like walks through the rubble of the of his actions of being responsible basically for creating the bomb that destroyed portions of Japan and caused untold havoc. And
Yeah,
uh,
they do the flashbacks or the flashes of like almost like a horror movie where you have the characters being affected the way that people would be affected by a atomic
yeah,
bomb blast.
yeah. And then it's in that scene I thought, and this is also about Dune, that he who has the power to destroy a thing has control of the thing. And
Indeed.
it really got me thinking like he knows, and we've talked about it, the amount of like destruction that this could potentially cause and that could cause in the future. And he goes and he meets with uh, the next president that he can. I think it's one after who's currently the president when the bomb drops, or
No,
maybe
I think
what?
it was Truman.
Okay, it was
So
Truman.
yeah, so I think FDR. Anyway, you keep talking. I'll do some research.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm pretty sure it was Truman. I know he was played by Gary Oldman. Um, and a side thing, we just need Gary Oldman to play Joseph Stalin, and then he's played every player in the World War II. And we
That was
just have
Gary Oldman?
that was Gary Oldman. I had to look it up.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
Wow.
He disappears into every role. And the fact that they put Gary Oldman in the back lines for a single scene in an Oval Office set is mind blowing.
Mind blowing. So to answer your question, FDR dies and Truman becomes president, and
Right.
Truman's the one that drops the bomb.
Okay. Okay. I know Oppenheimer appeals to somebody else later on, so that's what I'm getting confused on. So
Mm-hmm.
he's in the White House, he's having this conversation, and he says to President Gary Oldman, "I feel like I've got blood on my hands." And Gary Oldman looks at him with like just like this disdain and pulls from his pocket his handkerchief and like dangles it in front of him as almost like like we'll wipe it off, like like what the hell are you on about? And says, well, nobody is gonna remember the guy who built the bomb because I'm the one who dropped it, basically. And that in my mind immediately made me stop thinking of, well, Oppenheimer is the one that has the power anymore. He never had it in the first place, but he himself believed he did. And
Right.
uh
Well, and I think that that other people around him, like Matt Damon, um, they created this cult of personality, which gave him that power.
yes.
Um, yeah. But and that too, like it's interesting because, and I wonder if this would be a deleted scene or, if they would ever have alluded to it in a script and then taken it out, was that before it gets to that point though, at some point in this whole apparatus, Oppenheimer could have stopped it. He could have pulled out, he could have sabotaged it, but he doesn't. And I think that that's significant.
Yeah, that's something I hadn't considered at all.
Yeah, because and it's like Niels Bohr. There's this scene at the Christmas party where
Yeah,
he says to him like really think about what you're doing and what you're unleashing on the world. I'm paraphrasing there because I do not remember what he actually says.
Yeah,
Um,
he didn't want to be a part of it, but he was
yeah,
happy to
because
get out of Europe, where he may have been roped into whatever the Nazis were doing.
yeah, I do wonder if and I know that this was based on a lot of historical accounts and maybe some autobiographies of Oppenheimer himself. So I
Yes,
don't know
so
if that was ever one of his thoughts, like if he ever thought about um, stopping.
yeah, this was based on a specific book that was
Hmm.
written about his life. I'll edit it in post what the book's called. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, that would have been an interesting thing to explore, and definitely something that we could see him grappling with. But
I think it, so I
that
think
feels a
it's,
bit too Hollywood of a scene, you know,
yeah,
because
but
often we rewrite it so that way these historical figures like
mhm.
actually try to be on the right side of history, even though they haven't been. Um,
Yeah,
Maybe
I
that
think
wasn't the
that,
right way of phrasing it, but
yeah, so there was the scene with Niels Bohr, and Oppenheimer at that time kind of shrugs it off. I think that the first time that you see him having any like real regrets is when he's at the meeting where they talk about what they're going to do with the bomb, and that it's going to be two cities in Japan, and it's after. I think that the other important thing is that it's after the Nazis lose.
yes,
So up until the point where the Nazis lose, I don't think that he had any qualms whatsoever,
right,
especially as a Jewish man, and being Jewish was a very large part of this movie and his identity.
yes,
Um, so I think that he starts to have the worries about it um, when he's talking to the scientists from Chicago before going to that meeting, and where they stress like you have to tell them how we feel about this is important, like we don't think that this is good. um it's cool that we have it, we shouldn't use it. And I think that he tries to say that at the military meeting, but the military guys, it is at that point where he has no control. He has lost control of the bomb. He does not have the power to destroy. He loses the control of the bomb. And then the next time that we really get the impression that he has regrets is after Trinity, like as it's happening, and he sees it, and he sees the destruction, and he acknowledges how much it's really going to change the world. And he says the quote, which had already appeared in the movie once before, and that
yeah,
was odd, and we can talk about that too.
yes.
He says, I have become death, destroyer of worlds. And, that's what we know about him. And at that point, he has no other choice but to embrace that identity because he's done it. There's no going back. As much as he might regret it in that moment, there is no going back.
None at all. Like you can't sweep this one under the rug.
Nope. It's there. It worked. It has the ultimate power to destroy. And I think that that quote then was great, and I think we all expected it, and it was.
Yes. Now its appearance earlier on in the film we can talk about.
Yes.
Uh,
So talking about things that we didn't like in this film,
yeah, there were a couple.
there were a couple, and I mean, as a woman, I have to say that the female characters in this movie did not give me any life. They sucked.
No, so there's his lover who is a communist, and there is Oppenheimer's wife who at in like one of their first meetings is like, yeah, I became a housewife and I hate it. And then for the rest of the movie, she is relegated to being a housewife and she hates it. And
Yeah.
it's
I mean, and
uh
and as true to history as that is, I because she was a biologist and she did, give up her, life to be a mom and go to Los Alamos and all that jazz. Like, ugh, I wish they could have done more with her in the beginning of the movie. However, at the end of the movie, near the end, in that last quadrant of the movie, she does have some really good lines where she is reminding them that, or she is like turning, she is propelling that turn of them all realizing that Strauss is the bad guy, which
Yes.
I think Oppenheimer might have known all along because he is unperturbed by all this and very much like, whatever. Um,
He doesn't hold grudges, really.
right. Which is
Um,
good because, wow, the grudges that have come toward him and ruined his
yeah,
life.
yeah.
She also, does a decent job of, or I don't want to say it's a decent job, but the her being there for him and being upset and emotive about the situation that, they're all very much realizing is inevitable, and, being supportive of him and being angry for him, I think is an interesting, thing that's going on there. I liked that. I thought that, like, there's a scene at the end where, he doesn't, after he doesn't get his clearance, she like is upset for him and she cries, and he says that, I don't think he says it's going to be all right, but he gives that impression. And I
Hmm.
thought that was an interesting dynamic because, you know, even regardless of the gender dynamic, it is very hard to be the partner, the romantic partner of a, brilliant person who is, has just so much going on.
Yeah.
That being said, she could have been better. She could have been more dynamic instead of the like depressed housewife and
Who's an alcoholic some or most or all of the time and negligent of their
yeah,
child, and yeah, they
yeah. I
don't they
mean,
don't paint her in the best light, despite
right.
that they make her very supportive of her husband as well. I don't it's very strange.
Right, and I wish that support would have come out earlier in the movie. It does. It also, the other scene with her yelling at him after his other love interest passes away. She like yells at him, and she's like, "You got to get it together. You got shit to do." I also enjoyed that scene. I thought that was well done, and I thought that dynamic was good. But this movie's female characters were just not great.
Yes, so let's talk about the communist.
Yeah. So Florence Pugh, great actress, love her, love most movies she's in, very attractive.
Yes.
And this was just a total flop in my opinion for her as a character. We talked about how, the communists in this movie are basically just like cocktail drinking, philosophers, and that's her. She has
So
no substance.
in she gives a really great performance of what she's doing, but I don't think she has a lot to work with. In a more Hollywood thing, she would be sleeping with Oppenheimer to get the secrets, to work for the Soviets, to be that sort of thing. And that plot and its consequences are kind of alluded to through other people as there being some kind of spy that's on the project. In a more Hollywood film, she would definitively have that role, play a bigger part, and have more agency than she does. But here, she's really only played as this person who has, who's a communist kind of, and has some kind of like medical or mental disorder that
Right. Like
sleeps with Oppenheimer. That's
yeah.
about it. That's her
And
character.
I think they over dramatize her, like, I don't want to say manic, but, because she, like, doesn't want to accept his flowers. She throws them in the trash. Like, she says very contradictory things. Like, I don't want you to, why do you keep, he asks why she keeps calling him if she doesn't want him to answer the phone. And she's like, well, don't answer the phone. Like, it's just, these are just kind of those like batshit, like written roles that women get put into, that these women don't actually exist. Like these things don't actually happen. Like people
Right.
don't behave like this. And I mean if they do, like it's odd and it's not normal. And this kind of stuff in movies normalizes this kind of like manic pixie dream girl behavior. I mean
I
that's what
was
she is. She's a manic pixie dream girl.
I was trying to bring that up because I absolutely believe that she's like on the cusp of being there. And like if there were a couple more scenes
Oh,
with
she
her, it
absolutely is.
you know
She pulls out a book of Sanskrit and has him read it to her while they're having sex.
okay, yeah,
That
that
is
is
manic pixie dream girl
that
behavior if I've ever described it.
yeah,
And she
okay.
commits suicide. I mean, that's a huge manic pixie dream girl thing. Oh, I'm angry now.
I've really got you worked up on this one.
Yeah, well,
Um
listen, the Sanskrit reading thing just bothered
I
the heck out of me.
I
It was
I
bad.
so in the Sanskrit reading thing, he says the line, I am death, destroyer of worlds. And I think that that just ruined the delivery of it later on when he's viewing the most tremendously terrible, terrific thing he's possibly ever done. Like it,
Indeed, yeah.
like look, if we're saying we're cutting something out of the movie, it's that line.
Yeah, and there is better ways that it could have been delivered. There absolutely is. Like if he would have said that at the cocktail party. So they're both holding the cocktails and she's like, "Well, what do you do for fun?" And he's like, "Well, I've been reading Sanskrit." And she's like, "Oh, what's in Sanskrit?" And he says, "Oh, Vishnu says, I become death, destroyer of worlds." That would have been a fun little anecdote at the cocktail party. During the sex scene, it was gratuitous, it was dumb, I did not like it, it upset me.
Yeah. So in the lead up to this film coming out, I saw in marketing that there was full frontal nudity, and I was confused. I was like, the scientists, they don't have sex. That's not how it works. And I was like, well, what the hell? Like, what's going to happen here? What's going on? And there was a lot of it. There was a lot more than I think was necessary. And that I think that really plays into a part of it of objectifying her character. In one interaction someone has with someone else, they say Oppenheimer's a womanizer, and you could understand that throughout a lot of other things without having a direct, sex scene like this. And even when he's talking about like having a relationship with someone else who we never see any part of that on screen, like uh, we don't need all the communist woman.
Yeah, it would have been so easy to have him, ogling girls through various points in the movie, just seconds of ogling and or maybe a little sexist, remark because this is the 1940s. It wouldn't have gone unnoticed. Or I mean it wouldn't have been noticed, like it wouldn't have jumped out at you in this like kind of a way.
Yeah, he
Like
he
yeah,
wouldn't he wouldn't lose his tenure for something like that.
no, not in 1940s.
No. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it's one of the small things in this film that I think didn't work as they probably hoped it would. Um,
Yeah, and I think that I think that
Look, it's
I
hard to
hate to
make
say it,
things
but
like
this
that work now.
yeah, and I think that this was written by men for men, in that kind of a world, I think that's part of the rub there. I don't want to impugn you as, man, whatever. But you know what I mean. Like the attention was just not there to creating female characters that even talk to each other, let alone, provided any kind of enhancement to the film.
Yeah, and especially in an era where like Rosie the Riveter, she came about in this era. It would have been nice to have, another perspective.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there were plenty of women who were involved in this, and I think that, the other characters, the woman who is working as a scientist in Los Alamos, and
Yeah,
her position is undermined, and she's just kind of like a character in the background, and it wouldn't have taken but a few lines of script at some point earlier on in the movie to make her a fully fleshed out character,
yeah,
and it's really disappointing that they didn't do that.
yeah. Especially when we have so many characters who come in for maybe like 3 scenes in the total movie of scientist men who we know, we recognize, we learn, we see, what they're doing in academics, what they're doing in the Los Alamos, and like them all at the Trinity taps. She was in a lot of those scenes, but didn't have the presence there that would be needed to create another female character that mattered, that had agency, that did something in this film, which is a damn shame.
Yeah, and they never even really like emphasize her. There was no scene where she was like, well, I think that blah, 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 because she is on a level playing field with these other scientists, theoretically, I think.
Yeah, I
Um,
think so.
and while so many other scientists have those sound bites where they make that suggestion that moves the project forward, she doesn't get that. And how hard would that have been? And I think that too, like, there's no, I mean, yes, there are going to be people that Wikipedia this whole movie and want it to be exactly historically accurate, blah, blah, blah. Having that scene in there would not have ruined that for everyone.
No. I mean, especially once we get later on and we have whole movies dedicated to the great women in science, I feel like, fuck it, just add that now. Just even if it's not the complete story, add in these figures who exist. But
Alas, not all movies are perfect,
no,
and I
no,
mean
no.
this movie is pretty goddamn good, and I know that this was an issue that was going to be an issue no matter what. And I
Yeah,
think that, if we wanted to turn this on its head, this movie is, I think Nolan said that he wrote it from the perspective of Oppenheimer, so as if he is Oppenheimer.
it very much
And
feels like that. We're in his shoes and see through his eyes the entire film.
and if he's a womanizer who doesn't, respect women, or doesn't, really appreciate the fullness that they can bring to whatever, then it's possible to rationalize at least how they made these roles, and why they made them this way.
Yeah,
And so we can, with a grain of salt, imagine that this movie is not made in 2023, but this is Oppenheimer's thoughts in 1960 or so. um, yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention was the suicide of Florence Pugh's
the
character,
communist lady.
the
Yes,
communist lady who I cannot remember her name. Jean, Jean. I want to say Jean.
yes, Jean.
So
Yes,
yeah,
Jean
so she
Parmesan.
did, historically, she did commit suicide, or at least that's what they say. And I think that knowing she's a communist and knowing what happens later, I wish that they would have slightly overemphasized or slightly made it seem a little more, you know, you know, that she didn't kill herself, that she was assassinated.
So there were a couple things that led me to that conclusion, and one was he's being followed on his way to, like, have this secret meeting with her where they plow, and that, well, from that point on she's going to be followed if he's meeting with her. If they're following him, they're going to send somebody else to follow her. But I could have sworn there's a part where she's drowning herself, and
Hmm.
there is a, like, black leather glove hand on her. And I
Okay.
I If I'm wrong, I apologize, but I really thought I,
You
remember
thought you
seeing
saw
that.
it?
I
Yeah.
think I saw it. Okay. And I think that was in the like flashes of him being in the fetal position on the ground after he got off his horse. And like of him, being like, oh, like,
Yeah.
she's dead. I did this thing. Ah. And
Yeah, because
yeah,
I mean, and in that moment you're going through so I wish they would have done a little more in that scene to give us that impression because, he's imagining A, she killed herself because I wasn't there for her, which is
right,
terrible.
right.
Or she was killed because I talked to her.
Which is, equally as worse.
Terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, so both of these things in his mind, he killed her. It's his fault that she's dead. And I wish that they would have, maybe played that up just slightly more.
Hmm.
And the glove thing is interesting. I will be excited to see that and to look for that, or to maybe even Google online and see if that is a thing. But that's kind of what I wanted. And the other thing that's interesting here is you say that it comes up in that scene because there's a couple different scenes where she's like preparing to commit suicide,
Right.
and there's flashes. And, looking back on it now, was that a flash of her actually doing that? Or was that a flash of him thinking about her doing that?
So there are very few scenes that aren't told in Oppenheimer's perspective, and most of those are with Robert
Strauss.
Downey Jr. Yeah, Strauss. And I feel like if we're seeing it, it's his interpretation of what happens. Very much in this, it's written from his perspective. It's what he would have seen.
Mm.
Um, And yeah, I guess there's something to be said about the black and white and the color being like a part of that. I think I heard somebody say that like, oh well, it's about like what's the objective truth and then what's like speculation. And I don't feel like that's an accurate statement
No,
at
I don't
all.
think that at all. I think that you're closer to hitting it on the head with the black and white is Strauss's interpretation of what happened, and the color is Oppenheimer's.
Right. Yeah, that would be a bit more accurate.
Now,
I'd
here's a
I'd say.
question because I cannot really remember, because my mind, I've seen enough black and white movies that I translate them into color in my head, and that's weird, but that's what happens to me. The scenes where he's in the room with the interrogators,
Yeah.
is that in black and white or color?
No, that's all in color.
Okay. And he's always in the room with them, isn't he?
Yeah,
Even the other.
you're talking about Oppenheimer, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, all that's in color. He's not always in the room with those guys, but there's never a scene where he's not in the room.
Okay.
Um, even when his friends are testifying, he's like sitting on a couch.
Yeah, yeah. And him on that side couch looking sad in the back when they call
Yeah,
him a communist. Because I think that that's the other thing is that, in the transformation of Oppenheimer over time, if anything, he's just trying to protect, the world from, the destruction of through greater bombs and other means, rather than, assist in any kind of political endeavor. I think that his politics change very quickly from being, and I think that he acknowledges that he can't, do anything except minimize the impact. He can't be a politician. He can't be, a communist or whatever.
yeah,
And I thought that the other scene that was really good was with Matt Damon, where Oppenheimer says something um, like you brought me on this project to control what I was doing and to stop me from doing these things that I want to do. And I thought that was interesting. It
yeah,
was a nice little scene
yeah.
where he has that revelation.
I think they had some fantastic chemistry working together.
Yeah, Matt Damon plays a hell of a soldier.
Yeah, Matt Damon is I always enjoy him. Um, I thought he did a great job.
We should put Saving Private Ryan on the list here.
Yes, yes, Matt Damon's movie.
Well, it's a Tom Hanks's movie, but
Right,
Matt Damon is
right.
Ryan. So
Matt Damon's in it.
yeah, he's the one to get saved.
Yes, he is Ryan.
So speaking of other World War II movies, when I was talking to someone about this, about going to see it, I said she was a little concerned that it would be too much for her. And I think that a lot of people, when they think of war movies, they think of Saving Private Ryan, they think of All Quiet on the Western Front, they think of Dunkirk, they think of 1914 or 17, whatever movie that is. But
Yeah,
these movies
17.
that are incredibly violent, incredibly tense, incredibly anxiety inducing, incredibly just gross, from a, war wounds perspective.
There
Um,
is none of that here.
there's none of that here, and it actually reminded me very much, so much of this movie reminded me of Imitation Game with Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. Of the scientists working behind the scenes on
Yeah.
something that is groundbreaking and terrifying at the same time.
And
Yeah.
you also have a similar character arc. This will be a spoiler for anybody that has not seen Imitation Game. Don't listen for the next minute or two. You have a scientist who has some personality defects and who is difficult to work with, who ultimately, after the project is over, has his life destroyed by the military apparatus.
Oh
And
yeah.
this is, the struggle of the brilliant academic who, absent the politics of the academic institutions and the war machine, would be able to have a limitless potential. I think Oppenheimer and Turing and so many other great scientists could have gone so much farther had they not been hampered by the institutions that they were part of.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. He's a great example. I wasn't even thinking about Alan Turing.
Yeah, and ultimately, that's my takeaway from this movie is that the system is broken.
Yeah. So are you ready for our final segment?
Yeah, yeah, let's do it. What did we
Okay.
learn, Garrett?
Um, Atoms go smash.
We did learn that. We didn't learn the specifics, but we did learn some, important details that I wouldn't say that I specifically learned anything, but I am not in the normal percentile of knowledge goers of atomic energy.
Yeah, I was certainly exposed to a lot more names, a lot more
Hmm.
people and things to look into. I'll probably do a dive around Wikipedia. Um, yeah, uh,
Yeah.
I didn't so much want to spoil this one for myself by digging too deep, but I don't feel like that would really be possible. Like,
That's true. I think that in retrospect, I don't think that by learning about what happened, this movie would be spoiled because it has so many elements to it that keep you engaged and keep you wondering what happens next, especially with the time jumps and, the seriousness of what they're doing and the personalities and all of those elements that are involved in this movie. It
yeah,
is there's a lot going on.
yeah,
So one of the things that I thought was the most interesting was the discussion of the atmospheric chain reaction and this less than 0 percentile chance that when they set off Trinity, the atmosphere would have a chain reaction in it and the entire globe would go up in flames.
yeah. That's not only a very scary thought, but a possibility, something that probably outside of a few of the people that worked on Trinity knew about. And it's alarming that that sort of thing would be kept from Matt Damon and allowed to continue, and more alarming, probably kept from the American people and the people of the world for a while after it. It's kind of
Well,
alarming to
I
think.
think I think that once they did it and they knew it wasn't going to happen, they weren't worried about it anymore because it wasn't a this could happen. So if we set off 1,000 bombs, this could happen once. I don't think it was that kind of a situation. It was a
If this is going to
the
happen, it'll happen every
the
time.
first time,
Yeah,
yeah, or every time, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And there was a non-zero chance that could happen. And I think that in an alternate, and so I think that when they first talk about this and Oppenheimer presents this information to Einstein, and they're talking about this in the face of the Nazis. And the Nazis are going to make this bomb and they're going to set it off if we don't set it off first. That that motivation is behind it, and it's very like level, and it's understood, and that's all there. But then later on when they go when they're when Matt Damon learns about this, the Nazis are done and they're just fighting Japan, and the stakes are a lot lower.
yeah,
And in the alternative history land, we have a alternative history where that bomb could have exploded the entire world. But we also have an alternative history where they would have pulled that plug and said it's not worth it.
yeah.
And
And
that's, yeah,
I mean, at that point, you really go and you say, "Hey, we have something that'll destroy everything, or that we think can destroy everything. This is done. We're stopping. Like we've reached that point." And I think
yeah, this
that's
is over.
yeah, and that's something that gets brought up a few times in the movie is we're not making the bomb to end the war. We're making the bomb to end all wars. And in a way, kind of. In another way, absolutely not. There are over 12,000 nuclear armaments around today, so I don't think we've stopped it.
No, I think that, so when we talk about, the end of the world and all of that, I think that on the bright side, like, yes, this caused all of that in the Cold War and like the arms race, blah, 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 blah. We never had another situation where a nuclear bomb was dropped purposefully on a city that we know about. Um, since 1945. We
Yeah,
have, in general, I think that since I've been born, there's only been 10 bomb tests or so that we know about, which, on one hand, yes, this is a that we know about situation. On the other hand, the entire world now has access to the kind of data and measuring equipment to know exactly when someone is to set off a nuclear bomb.
yeah. I mean, even back then they had pretty good idea, but now we have sensors everywhere.
Yeah, yeah, we are certainly more able to know now than even 60 years ago.
Oh yeah,
The total number of bombs that have been tested are 1,030, and that's for all. That's just for the United States. Russia has set off 715. France, 210. It's a lot. So,
where are they doing this in France?
oh,
There's
they did it in Africa, Garrett. They did it in
oh,
Africa.
oh, right, I forgot. That's where we put
And
everything.
I think some islands too. They like we did the Bikini Islands. They had their own island of of Doom, and they started in 1960. That was the French. So we started in 45, and with just one, and the Russians started in 49 with just one, and then it continued. So since I was born, so the year I was born, there was a bunch, but since then, it has dramatically decreased. There was, let me see, 23 since I was born.
Oh, that's
So
not bad.
yeah,
Probably
yeah,
about
we're
half that since I was, so that's good.
yeah, yeah. Well, actually, since you were born, even fewer, because most of them were in the early 90s. So five, six,
Nice.
7, 10. You get 10.
Cool. I get 10 nukes. Nice.
10 nukes for you. What did I say? 17 for me.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
you know, people in our country, people here in America, have been affected by the radiation and the fallout that has occurred from nuclear testing, dropping bombs to try to dig oil wells, all sorts of shit.
Yeah,
Um,
we did some dumb shit with nuclear bombs,
but
guys.
look,
Like,
it's just guy stuff. We like to explosions.
yeah, well, I think that the other thing is that when we think about these bombs and we think about destruction and we think about radiation, you know, how destructive are they really when we compare them to, as they do in the movie, the firebombing of Tokyo, the firebombing of Dresden, the bombings
Oh
of
yeah,
Berlin and London? Um, yes, radiation is a problem and it's a
bad.
long-term problem and it causes some big issues. But over the last 50 years, we have figured out some solutions to radiation problems. Um, and it's difficult, but we do, we do some stuff. And I think that the real question is whether, you want an immediate death with a smattering of potential survivals, or do you want a slower death with a much lower rate of surprising survivals?
I'm gonna once again go with the Titanic option. All things lead back to Titanic. I'm taking the service pistol out,
Yeah.
and that'll be the end. I don't.
Yeah, yeah. If I see the nuclear bomb go off or I read it on the news, I'm calling it.
Yeah,
Sorry. Yeah.
sorry, guys. No more episodes.
Well, I mean, it depends on how close you are to the bomb and like, blah 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 blah. But New York City, I'm screwed. Sorry. You might be okay if it hits LA or San
Yeah,
Francisco.
yeah. I'll probably be fine. For a few days.
But it depends on, the size of the bomb and the direction of the wind. And I
Oh,
mean, if a nuclear bomb hits LA, you're going to be fine for a while.
well, I mean, physically, yes, but think about the detriments to the supply chain.
You got trains.
The trains go through Los Angeles.
Not the trains carrying the corn. I don't know.
Okay,
At this point, the price
that's
of
fair.
bread is $4, so I don't think that the supply chain going through Los Angeles is the issue. I
I
think it's
mean,
just
if
capitalism.
we get rid of Los Angeles, which is a huge market, that'll leave more shit for the rest of us.
That is true. It
So
might cause a economic collapse
I
and reduce inflation.
I guess yeah, I guess what we've learned here is drop more.
The price of bread is too high. Drop some bombs.
Drop a nuke on Los Angeles.
Oh my gosh. I think we've lost it. I think that
Oh, I'm definitely gonna cut a few of the things I've said so far. Probably not that. I thought that was more funny than the other things I said.
that was really good. The other thing that I was thinking about is the Watchmen.
Oh, Ozymandias.
Yeah, Ozymandias' theory is here, and I wonder what kind of conversations Oppenheimer and Ozymandias could have had. I think that's someone needs to explore that in a fan fiction.
Yeah, because in this movie brings up the idea of the ends justifying the means, and I think
Hmm.
this is one of those scenarios where kind of both sides in on this, but Ozymandias would probably have a strong stance.
Yeah, I mean, Ozzy's idea was very much that if you end the world and you give them something else to worry about, they won't kill each other.
Yeah.
And on this, issue, I think that a large percentage of the people working on the project thought that this bomb would be the bomb to end all bombs and all wars and be
Yeah.
the end, and we would have world peace. And alas, they
Yes. We
yeah,
we
they were
turned our
mistaken.
attention to fighting communism.
Yeah, we turned our attention to communism. We turned our attention to bombs rather than um, like creating efficiency in nuclear energy. And yeah,
Yeah. So well, what we learned, this was a pretty damn good movie.
yeah, it was a great movie. Great movie, despite my complaints. Um, yeah, 3 thumbs up.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I'll give it the 2 thumbs up. I don't know how to rate movies. I think it's demeaning, but this one was pretty good.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, we could have our own weird rating system. Like, I would say that this was a solid chicken sandwich.
I I can't even.
And this is the lesson that we should learn of immediately watching the movie, doing the podcast, and recording on a Friday night. Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone for tuning in to another episode of our podcast. I hope you all enjoyed Jaws like last week. Next week we'll be reviewing Ridley Scott's Alien as
Yeah. Real
another
excited for that
monster
one.
movie. Yeah, it's I feel like I've said this about every movie we've watched, but it is one of my favorites. Uh, and
Well,
there we'll see a monster that is more easily defeatable than the military industrial complex.
yeah, that's true. And I think that, the bottom line with doing this podcast and talking about movies is that in general, we are going to focus on movies that we like and movies that are good and to talk about them in ways that are new and interesting. And I hope that we've been bringing that with this movie, and I'm excited to talk about Alien, and because it is one of my favorite movies. Movie I saw when I was a young person, who should not have been watching that movie, and it is actually one of the movies that when I asked my dad, very long time ago, if he was afraid of anything, he said Alien from Alien.
Yes, I do recall having similar conversations, and
Yeah,
after seeing it, watching it with him, I understand.
yeah, it is a hell of a movie. So that's what's up next. Now, if there's any movies that you would like us to review and are interested in hearing our thoughts and opinions on, please leave a comment and like this video and let us know what you did or didn't enjoy.
Yeah, thank you so much for your participation and hearing us out. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night, y'all.